Next up is the side tricep pose. So again, this was a very close pose between the two. Nick's side tricep pose is one of his stronger poses. I think he's able to control his waist very well in this pose. He has very good ab detail and separation here. Obviously, he has great arms and shoulders again, great biceps, great triceps. Go down into his side leg, which is very, very strong. His conditioning actually looks a little bit better here, I feel like, because of that separation and denseness to his abs. And he's able to control his midsection and get those abs in enough where his waistline does not look too wide here in this pose. Very, actually, what I think is a more freaky side tricep pose. Then we get to Martin. I feel like Martin's side tricep, he was hitting a lot the old school variation, which when you plant that leg, instead of hitting with the traditional side leg pose, you're giving up leg size and leg width on the side. He's given up, that hamstring drop, which against a guy like Nick with crazy side legs, you can't afford to do. He also leans a little bit too much forward. I think it's a flexibility issue with trying to make sure he can get those hands locked in the back to extend the triceps. But if he's able to stand up straighter, so he's not getting that roundness over, and then you're seeing like his stomach is not as flat as it should be in this pose, he can make this pose a much, much stronger pose, because with Martin's physique, he, again, like I said, his outer arms and shoulders really have nice depth and detail to them. So this could become a big strength for him, but against Nick in this matchup, I thought this was definitely more of a Nick pose. So Nick takes it to make this 4-2 right now. Next up is the ab and thigh pose. So Martin's ab and thigh, I think, is very strong. Martin doesn't have the biggest abs, but his detail and separation in his midsection was very good at this show. Anytime he was even relaxed in his posing, he would just go back down to having a normal flat stomach, and you saw the detail and separation through the abs in the midsection. Of course, it helps that his waist is smaller. That makes the illusion and everything look better. When he does this head to toe, we're seeing great detail. I think we see a very nice taper from his lats down to his waist. And in this pose where he's able to lock out his quad, he hits this, then locks out that quad, you really see how good his quads are. Really see the shape, you really see the striations, you really see the detail in them. I think this is a very clean and very strong pose for Martin. For Nick's ab and thigh is still a pretty good pose for him because he has those thick, blocky, separated abs. Now, again, we're seeing him right next to a guy like Martin. We see that the waistline was the issue here when you're looking between these two. So I think Nick has to just work on getting that waistline back in, because he has that ab detail that he's able to hang with the guys that have the smaller waist and more taper in this pose when his waistline is in more, just because of that detail he has through the core. So this, I thought, was a clear Martin pose, and that would make it 4-3. And last up, we have your favorite most muscular. So again, I think this in the side chest, this is another toss-up pose, which I think some people would say, wow, that's crazy. What are you talking about? Well, here's why. We're judging you on every single pose you're doing. Nick, with his hands touching, doing his normal most muscular, standing straight up crab with his hands touching in front, is a crazy pose for him. His chest thickness, this is where his chest looks the best. He has crazy, crazy arms and shoulders. You still see through the window here, you see the detail in his abs. Then I think his lower body, like I said, his quads have come up from the last couple of years. So while the waistline is kind of being hidden when he does the pose this way, you're not looking at the waistline, just your eyes aren't being drawn to there, so you see the improvements in the legs and the freakiness and everything else. So when Nick's hitting this pose, and if Martin, which he did at some points, mimicked this pose and copied the pose what Nick was doing, Nick takes it. But these guys moved around a lot. And this is advice I have for a good amount of competitors. When you can hit certain variations and poses, when we're doing the comparisons, even if other guys are moving around and going to other poses, you need to stick to your strengths. So Martin hit a kind of hand on hip, one hand on hip, half crab, exposing his midsection with the leg straight out, flexing the quad. Honestly, a very good looking pose for him. He didn't really hit the hands touching straight up crab, as much as Nick did, but he did do it sometimes. He went to this pose a lot, which is a very clean looking pose. We're seeing even like the detail in the, lat to waist ratio of the midsection. His outer arms and shoulders have good detail and density to them. And then you're seeing the crazy conditioning and the shape and the muscularity in his quads. But hitting this pose next to Nick, when he's in that hands together straight up crab, he's just losing on muscularity. Nick just has that crazy size to him and density. So I would think Nick would still edge it out. But then I remember this clearly, the last round at prejudging, Nick started moving around too. Then all of a sudden, Martin is hitting his crab most muscular, which is the only most muscular, in my opinion, he should hit. He looks awesome in this pose. He dragged Nick into doing the crab most muscular at the end. There's a picture. Maybe I'll be able to even put it in here, even though I know we're doing the videos. Martin looks significantly better in this pose than Nick. Nick should never do a crab most muscular again. I'm sure he won't. But right here at the end of prejudging, he ends prejudging, and Martin hit the better most muscular. So this is why I think this show was so close, because when you're moving around, you're getting judged each time you're posed. Like, okay, someone won this pose the first round, but it's super close. That's why we're posing everybody to see, is someone going to fade? Are you going to even hit different poses like this? You can pose yourself in, or you can pose yourself out of not only placings, but just the comparison when you're going up for a certain placing against a person. So I think Nick stuck with the straight up, standing up straight crabs, hands touching, most muscular. I think he did it enough where he still would edge Martin out through both posing rounds. But like people would think, this is a slam dunk pose. It's one of Nick's best poses. Getting out of that position, and whether he would put his hand on a hip or he would do the crab, that would give the edge to Martin and Martin's physique. So again, you can see how judges would change their minds on this pose. So really, at the end here, it scores 5 poses, 3 poses for Nick. But the side chest and the most muscular are 2 toss-up poses that you can see really, really can go either way. That's what makes the show so great. That's what I think made it so exciting, is just overall, Martin, I think, showed that he is probably a very big contender to do damage at his first Olympia. He went up against a guy that's been top 5 the last 3 years, looked at as a top 3 bodybuilder in the world, unbelievable bodybuilder, and Martin pushed him to the limit. So it was Martin's best version. I'm excited to see what he does at the Olympia. Probably will rebound, gained a little bit of size for him. Even, a pound, 2 pounds, 3 pounds of muscle on a rebound, and then he brings his conditioning again. Is going to make a big difference with how his physique is, just his structure and his round, full muscle bellies. For Nick wasn't quite his best. I think he can push it to the Olympia, where he focuses really on bringing in that waistline more. He's improved body parts. I think he keeps improving his chest. He keeps improving his back. He keeps improving his quads. He's only going to keep doing it. Bringing the waistline in, this is going to change that flow to his physique. And then I think if he nails his conditioning 100%, that brings out the true freakiness in his physique. So he's, of course, a contender in Mr. Olympia weekend. But I think it's exciting that another young guy is coming up. It just went toe-to-toe with a top guy, a true top guy. And I just think this Olympia is going to be incredible, because I feel like all these guys are bringing it. I mean, I'll just say, you saw Samson and Hadi at the beginning of the year. Now you see these two. We got plenty more guys that we haven't seen yet this year. And plus, we'll see Derek when he comes back to defend his title. I'm assuming all of them are going to make gains. This is the most exciting Olympia in a long, long time that I can remember. In third, we had Tonio, and in fourth, we had Stu. Just real fast, since this is already a very long video, I'll just highlight what I think both of them need to improve on. So for Tonio, I think this was a very, very good Tonio. You see against guys like Nick and Martin, he still needs to add a little bit more width to his physique. I know he's a little bit of a smaller guy, but you even see, when he raises his arms, in the front double, you see even from the back, his back is amazing when it comes to the back double and back lat spread, but he doesn't have that width that both of those guys have. Even standing next to Stu, he doesn't have the same width, even in the back lat spread. Now, I still think Tonio wins the back lat spread against Stu, but you see when it comes to width alone, he just doesn't have that same width that these, kind of bigger guys have. So he can work on adding a little bit more width. I think he can still add a little bit more fullness and thickness to his chest. And I think something he really needs to work on is adding more to his hamstrings. You really see this on the side and the back poses when you look at the leg size of him compared to Martin and Nick. So he needs to really highlight those areas. I think his conditioning was very good. I think he's been a little bit sharper, before, but this conditioning was nothing to sneeze at. He was still very conditioned. He had great lines and detail and separation. Obviously, he has a great midsection as well. That's what makes his front poses so strong and stick out so much, is that with the small waist, he has great detail throughout his core. So, the front double, even though he's not the widest, it still is a very strong pose. The front lat spread, I really like his front lat spread. You see a little bit more width in this pose than you see in the front double. And of course, his ab and thigh is very strong too. Most muscular, he could, be adding a little bit more size, and that's what will take him to be able to compare closer to the two guys that were ahead of him. With Stu, I think it was actually very close between Stu and Tonio for third and fourth. With Stu, he could use just a little bit more size to his legs, especially for his quad sweep. Next, he needs definitely more density to his back. I think that's his number one thing that he needs to work on. It definitely improved a lot just from last year. Tonio and Stu were first and second at this show last year, so we kind of got to see them battle it out again here. Stu's overall size, he definitely got bigger. I think he still exhibits great lines. He has a nice small waist. Specifically, his ab and thigh is awesome. You see he gets ready to get in that pose, and then when he blows out all the air on his abs, you see his waist become so tiny with nice abs as well. The taper's crazy. So for him, really improving that overall back and the density to his back, adding a little bit more sweep to his quads, doing that is going to basically increase his leg width, not only from the front, but also in the back poses as well. And I think he has a very, very strong side poses. So just getting a little bit more detail etched in to some of the front poses will help him a lot. Really, Tonio took a couple more poses than him. I'm not going to go pose by pose because we just don't have time for that on this video. But I thought Tonio took a couple more poses from him. But again, depending on peak and show week, these are two guys that are obviously pretty close. A show like that could go either way. So hopefully we're going to see not only them, but a couple of the other guys that were in that 5 through 10 range at this show continue on to, California or Toronto. And we're going to get some great battles with, of course, some new guys, of course, that didn't compete yet coming in. So I'm really excited for the rest of this season.